Listen to me carefully. What I am about to share is not for everyone. This message is urgent, sacred, and meant only for God's chosen ones. If you are not walking the divine path, if your heart is not aligned with God, you may feel restless, distracted, or tempted to leave right now. And that is fine. This is not for you. But if you are still here, listening to my voice, feeling something stir inside your spirit, then understand this clearly. This message reached you at the exact moment it was meant to. Not early, not late. Perfectly timed by God Himself. And it will change how you see your journey. Chosen one, something extraordinary has happened in the spiritual realm. Your endurance, your faith, your restraint in moments when you could have broken did something unexpected. You made God laugh with joy. Yes, laugh with joy. And even the devil did not see this coming. What you survived, what you overcame quietly, has shifted things in ways you don't yet fully understand. And before this message ends, I will explain why your hardest season was actually your greatest spiritual victory. Stay with me. Before we continue, chosen ones, give a like to this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, turn on the bell icon, share this message with other chosen ones, and comment 777 in the comments to declare that you are aligned with the divine mission God has placed on your life.
You were never supposed to break. Let me speak to you calmly now, chosen one. Take a breath. Slow your thoughts. I want you to hear this clearly, without fear, without doubt. You were never supposed to break. Not then, not now, not ever. I know there were nights when your strength felt like it was slipping through your fingers. Nights when you stared at the ceiling, asking God questions you never said out loud to anyone else. You smiled during the day, but inside something felt heavy. You wondered how much longer you could carry it. You wondered if this pressure meant you were failing. But listen to me. That pressure was not sent to destroy you. It was allowed to reveal you. Chosen ones are not tested the way others are. You see, when God places something powerful inside a person, life itself responds differently. Situations become heavier. People misunderstand you. Delays stretch longer than expected. And it feels unfair because it is not happening to everyone around you. That is where many lose clarity. They assume pain means punishment. They assume resistance means rejection. But in the spiritual realm, resistance often confirms value. Think about this. If you were insignificant, nothing would have come against you with such persistence. If your calling was small, the pressure would have been light. What you endured was proportional to what you carry. And yet, even under that weight, you did not become cruel. You did not become bitter. You did not lose your faith. You bent. You cried. You questioned. But you did not break. That matters more than you realize. There were moments you wanted to react. Moments you wanted to defend yourself, to explain your side, to expose what others did to you. You had every reason to speak, but something inside you said, "Be still. Wait. Trust me." That was not weakness. That was alignment. You see, breaking is loud. It spills everywhere. It demands attention. But endurance is quiet. It happens deep inside, where no one applauds and no one notices. And that is exactly where God was watching you the closest. I want you to understand something important. God never expected perfection from you. He expected sincerity. He expected humility. He expected obedience, even when it hurt. And you gave him that, even on days you thought you were barely surviving. Some of you felt ashamed for being tired. You felt guilty for feeling drained. You told yourself a chosen one should be stronger than this. But strength does not mean you never feel pain. Strength means you continue to choose faith while feeling it. You woke up on days you didn't want to. You prayed prayers that felt weak but honest. You kept your heart soft in a season that tried to harden you. That is not failure. That is spiritual maturity forming under pressure. Let me say this plainly. The enemy did not expect you to survive without losing yourself. He expected you to compromise. He expected you to lash out. He expected you to abandon your values to protect your ego. But you didn't. Instead, you stepped back. You grew quieter. You observed more. You learned discernment the hard way. You realized not everyone who smiles means well, and not every closed door is rejection. Some are protection. And while you thought nothing was happening, something deep was shifting. Your reactions changed. Your tolerance for chaos decreased. Your need for validation faded. You stopped chasing explanations. You started trusting God's silence more than people's noise. That is when something powerful happens. God begins to trust you with more responsibility, not blessings you can post about, but wisdom you can live with, not attention, but authority. And authority is never given to those who break easily. I know some of you questioned your worth during that season. You compared yourself to others who seemed to move faster, succeed quicker, or receive recognition easier. But what you didn't see is that God was not racing you against them. He was rooting you deeper. Trees that grow fast break in storms. Trees that grow deep stand for generations. You were being rooted. Every delay trained your patience. Every disappointment refined your expectations. Every unanswered prayer taught you surrender. You were learning to trust God, even when He didn't explain Himself. And that kind of faith cannot be taught. It must be lived. So no, you were never supposed to break. You were supposed to bend, learn, adjust, and rise wiser. And you did, even if you don't fully see it yet. Look at yourself now. You don't react the same way. You don't crave the same things. You don't chase the same approval. That is growth. That is evidence. That is proof that the pressure did not ruin you. It refined you. And that, chosen one, is why heaven smiled. There was a moment, maybe more than one, when you thought, if this is what being chosen feels like, I don't know if I want it. And God heard that thought. He didn't rebuke you for it. He understood it. Because even the strongest servants in Scripture reached moments of exhaustion. What made them chosen was not that they never felt overwhelmed, but that they stayed submitted even while overwhelmed. You stayed. You stayed when walking away would have been easier. You stayed when nobody clapped for your patience. You stayed when silence felt like abandonment. And that staying power is rare. That is why God allowed you to feel the weight, but never allowed the weight to crush you. He knew your limit, even when you didn't. Some of you don't give yourself credit for how much you endured without turning cold. You still care. You still pray for people who hurt you. You still believe in goodness, even after seeing the worst sides of human nature. That alone tells me your spirit was protected. Breaking would have meant losing your core, but you didn't lose it. You guarded it, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes through tears, sometimes through isolation. But you protected what God placed inside you. And here is the part that brings peace if you truly receive it. God was not disappointed in your weakness. He was pleased with your honesty. He was pleased that you came to Him confused instead of pretending strong. He was pleased that you didn't become someone you would later regret just to survive a season. So stop replaying those moments where you think you failed. You didn't fail. You endured. And endurance in the kingdom of God is not passive. It is active faith under pressure. You are still standing because you were never meant to break. When heaven laughed and hell fell silent. Now listen closely, because this is where many people misunderstand God. They imagine Him distant, serious, always testing, always correcting. But God is also relational. He observes, He responds. And yes, there are moments when heaven rejoices in ways you were never taught to imagine. There was a moment in your journey when heaven paused to watch you, not because you were doing something loud, impressive, or visible to people, but because you were doing something rare. You were enduring without becoming corrupted by the pain. That is when heaven laughed. Not laughter of mockery, not laughter at anyone's downfall, This was the laughter of deep satisfaction, like a father watching his child rise above a situation that was designed to limit them. God saw you choose restraint when retaliation was available. He saw you choose faith when bitterness was justified. He saw you choose growth when you could have chosen escape. And that surprised the enemy. The enemy studies patterns. He watches trauma. He analyzes emotional triggers. He waits for predictable reactions. Based on what you went through, he calculated your collapse. He expected you to self-destruct quietly or explode publicly. Either way, he expected you to lose your alignment. But something happened that disrupted his expectations. You didn't respond the way your past suggested you would. You didn't become who your wounds tried to shape you into. Instead, you matured. You slowed down. You became discerning. And that silence from you was not emptiness. It was control. Hell fell silent because confusion entered the system. You see, the enemy is loud when he understands you. He is aggressive when he knows your buttons. But when you stop reacting, when you stop explaining, when you stop giving emotional access, his strategies lose clarity. He doesn't know which angle to use anymore. That silence you entered was not retreat. It was elevation. While you thought you were falling behind, spiritually you were stepping into a higher level of authority. Authority does not shout. It does not announce itself. It simply stands firm. And when you stood firm without needing validation, heaven took notice. Let me say this clearly. God is not impressed by emotional displays. He is moved by consistency. Anyone can praise him when things go well, but very few remain aligned when the praise feels unanswered. You did. There were days you didn't feel spiritual, days you didn't feel strong, days you felt disconnected and dry. Yet you still chose not to betray your values. You still chose not to act out of character. That quiet obedience is powerful. The enemy expected drama. He expected emotional collapse. He expected you to expose yourself in moments of weakness. But instead, you withdrew inwardly. You reflected. You learned. You healed in private. That kind of growth cannot be attacked easily. This is why I say you made God laugh with joy. Because joy comes when expectation is exceeded, and you exceeded what was expected of you at that level. God saw maturity forming where immaturity once ruled. He saw discernment replacing desperation. He saw humility replacing ego. And heaven responds to maturity. That is why certain battles suddenly stopped. That is why certain people faded out of your life without explanation. That is why some attacks lost intensity. Not because you became invisible, but because you became less accessible. The enemy could no longer reach you the same way. Hell fell silent because your reactions no longer fed it. I want you to understand this so you stop doubting yourself. Silence in the spiritual realm is often confirmation. When attacks stop suddenly, it is not always because the threat is gone. Sometimes it is because the strategy failed. You became unpredictable in the best way, not emotionally unstable, but spiritually grounded. You stopped operating from wounds and started operating from wisdom. That shift matters. God laughs with joy when a chosen one graduates from reaction to response, when they stop being controlled by their environment and start being led by discernment. That is when authority is established. And authority does not need noise. You may not have heard applause. You may not have received recognition, but heaven acknowledged your growth, and hell had nothing left to say. That is not coincidence. That is confirmation. And the most beautiful part is this. You didn't even realize it was happening while it was happening. You were just trying to survive with integrity. But God was watching the details, the pauses, the restraint, the patience, and he smiled. Because you didn't just survive, you matured. Let me take this even deeper, because some of you still underestimate what truly happened in the unseen. There was a specific moment when the enemy realized you were no longer operating from your wounds. That moment terrified him. Wounds make people predictable. He knows how to press them. He knows how to reopen them. But when healing begins, confusion follows. and you crossed that line quietly. You stopped seeking closure from people who never intended to give it. You stopped explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped begging for fairness, and in doing so, you removed leverage the enemy depended on. That shift did not happen overnight. It happened through exhaustion, through disappointment, through surrender, and that is why it was real. You didn't fake healing, you grew into it. Heaven laughed because you passed a test without knowing it was a test. God loves when obedience becomes instinct, when faith becomes posture instead of performance. You didn't say, "Look how spiritual I am." You simply lived aligned. And hell fell silent because there was no entry point left. You didn't give access through anger. You didn't give access through pride. You didn't give access through desperation. You became guarded without becoming hardened. That balance is rare. Some of you thought losing certain people meant losing protection. In reality, you gained clarity. God removed noise so you could hear direction, and once you heard it, you stopped moving impulsively. That is when authority settles in. Authority does not announce itself. It does not chase recognition. It moves with quiet certainty. And when you stepped into that, the enemy stepped back. This is why certain temptations don't hit you the same anymore. This is why old triggers feel weaker. This is why drama feels exhausting instead of exciting. That is not boredom. That is growth. God's joy came from watching you choose long-term peace over short-term relief. Watching you resist becoming someone reactive just to feel powerful in the moment. So if you've been feeling oddly calm lately, even without clear answers, that calm is not emptiness. It is stability forming. It is spiritual grounding. It is evidence that you are no longer easy to shake. Heaven laughed because you became solid, and hell stayed silent because solid ground cannot be easily broken. Receive that. Why your silence confused the enemy. Let me explain something that most people never understand about silence. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not avoidance. And silence is definitely not fear. Silence, when chosen consciously, is one of the highest forms of spiritual intelligence. The enemy expected you to speak. He expected you to react. He expected you to defend yourself, to explain your pain, to expose what others did wrong. He expected emotional noise, because emotional noise creates spiritual access. Every reaction is a doorway. Every outburst is information. But you closed the doors, not because you were scared, but because you were tired of wasting energy on battles that produced no growth. You reached a point where you realized that explaining yourself to the wrong people costs more than it gives, and that realization changed everything. Your silence confused the enemy because it disrupted his pattern. He studies behavior. He tracks responses. He waits for familiar cycles to repeat. But when you stopped responding the same way, his strategy lost accuracy. You didn't disappear. You didn't withdraw in defeat. You simply became selective. You chose where your words went. You chose where your emotions went. And most importantly, you chose where your spirit was allowed to engage. That choice is powerful. Silence removes emotional leverage. When the enemy cannot provoke you, he cannot predict you. When he cannot predict you, he cannot control outcomes. This is why your silence became protection without you even realizing it. Some of you thought being quiet meant losing your voice. In truth, you were learning timing. You were learning that words spoken at the wrong time weaken authority, and words withheld at the right time strengthen it. God understands silence. Scripture is filled with moments where silence preceded breakthrough, where waiting did more than action. You stepped into that wisdom without needing to announce it. While others were arguing, you were observing. While others were reacting, you were discerning. While others were explaining themselves, you were being refined internally. And refinement always happens quietly. The enemy could no longer read you. Your triggers weren't obvious anymore. Your emotional patterns changed. You didn't give him the same access points. And that is why attacks started missing their target. Silence starves manipulation. It starves chaos. It starves confusion. Let me say something that will free some of you. You are never obligated to respond to every misunderstanding. You are never required to defend your character to people committed to misunderstanding you. Silence does not mean agreement. It means disengagement. And disengagement is strength. This is where many chosen ones mature. They realize that peace is not found in winning arguments. It is found in choosing where to invest spiritual energy. God allowed you to feel misunderstood because clarity does not always come through explanation. Sometimes it comes through consistency. And your consistency spoke louder than any words ever could. The enemy expected emotional exposure. He expected you to leak frustration, anger, or desperation. But instead, you became inwardly anchored. You processed privately. You healed quietly. And because of that, your spirit became guarded without becoming closed. That balance confused the enemy deeply, because most people swing to extremes. They either react or withdraw completely. But you learn to stand still. Standing still is not stagnation. It is grounding. When God teaches silence, He is teaching stewardship. Stewardship of words, stewardship of emotion, stewardship of presence. You didn't lose your voice, you refined it, and now when you speak, it carries weight. That is why your silence mattered. That is why it protected you. That is why it confused the enemy. And that is why God smiled watching you choose wisdom over reaction. You wondered if staying silent meant you were being passive. You questioned whether God expected you to speak up more, fight back more, prove yourself more. But what you didn't see in the moment is that God was teaching you mastery. Mastery over impulse, mastery over ego, mastery over emotion. Not every battle is won by engagement. Some are won by refusal. Refusal to argue. Refusal to explain. Refusal to bleed emotionally in front of people who would only study your wounds instead of help heal them. Your silence was not avoidance. It was discernment in action. There were conversations God intentionally removed you from because speaking would have delayed your healing. There were arguments He shut down because winning them would have cost you peace. And you listened even when it felt uncomfortable. That obedience protected your future self. The enemy thrives on emotional exposure. He doesn't need your whole story. He only needs fragments of unresolved pain, and silence denies him those fragments. You stopped feeding cycles that never led anywhere. This is why certain people became louder when you became quieter. They needed your reaction to feel validated. And when they didn't get it, they revealed more about themselves than you ever could have revealed about them. God was showing you something without words. Silence also teaches patience, and patience sharpens discernment. You began to notice patterns you missed before. You saw motives more clearly. You stopped romanticizing people's intentions. That clarity is priceless. Some of you are finally at peace with being misunderstood, not because it doesn't hurt, but because it no longer controls you. You learned that being understood by God matters more than being explained to people. That is maturity. And when maturity enters, chaos exits. The enemy doesn't know how to fight someone who no longer needs to be right, who no longer needs to be seen, who no longer needs to win. That kind of person is anchored. So, if silence became your language in certain seasons, honor it. It wasn't emptiness. It was protection. It was training. It was God teaching you how to move with authority instead of noise. And now, when you choose to speak, it will not be to defend yourself. It will be to direct, to heal, to guide. That is the power your silence created. The season you thought was failure. Let me speak gently here because this part touches old wounds. The season you labeled as failure was not failure at all. It was one of the most strategic periods of your life, even though it felt like nothing was moving. You measured that season by visible results, by progress you could show, by answers you could explain. And because those things were missing, you assumed something had gone wrong. You assumed you missed God, or worse, that God had moved on without you. But listen to me. God does not abandon what He chooses. He prepares it. What felt like stagnation was actually separation. God was pulling you out of environments that no longer matched who you were becoming. He slowed you down on purpose, because speed without clarity leads to destruction. During that season, doors closed that you prayed would open. Opportunities disappeared without explanation. Plans fell apart at the last moment. And each time you felt a quiet disappointment settle in your chest. You didn't complain much, you just carried it. What you didn't see is that God was reducing noise. He was stripping distractions. He was removing roles, identities, and attachments that would have conflicted with what He is building in you now. Failure breaks people. Preparation humbles them, and humility is necessary before elevation. In that season, your ego was confronted. Your expectations were challenged. You had to sit with yourself without constant affirmation. That is uncomfortable, but it is necessary for anyone God intends to use with integrity. You learned what truly mattered. You learned who stayed when nothing was happening. You learned how to hear God without relying on external confirmation. That season taught you patience in a world addicted to speed. It taught you obedience without applause. It taught you how to trust silence without spiraling into fear. You are not falling behind. You are being hidden. God hides chosen ones before revealing them. Not because they are unworthy, but because exposure too early can damage what is not fully formed. Some of you were protected from success you were not yet ready to handle. Protected from platforms that would have magnified insecurity. Protected from relationships that would have drained you. That season removed illusions. You stopped chasing things that looked good but felt wrong. You stopped forcing connections that required you to shrink. And quietly, your standards rose. You became more selective, more intentional, less impressed. That is not failure. That is discernment developing. Let me say this clearly. Nothing was wasted. Every delay carried instruction. Every disappointment revealed alignment issues. Every closed door redirected you. You came out of that season different, not louder, not flashier, wiser. And wisdom is never failure. If God had given you what you wanted back then, you might have lost who you are now. And who you are now can carry what is coming. So stop apologizing to yourself for a season that shaped you. Stop calling preparation a mistake. Stop labeling growth as loss. That season was not the end of your story. It was the foundation. And foundations are built underground, unseen, and misunderstood. But without them, nothing stands. During that time, you felt invisible. Not just overlooked, but unseen. Messages went unanswered. Efforts went unnoticed. Prayers felt like they were hitting the ceiling and falling back down. And because you are human, you started questioning your value. You wondered if you had misheard God or imagined your calling. But invisibility was not abandonment. It was concealment. God hides what is valuable when the environment is not safe for exposure. Just like seeds are planted underground, not displayed on the surface. Darkness does not mean death. It means development. In that season, God was developing your inner life, your motives, your reactions, your ability to function without constant validation. You were learning to be faithful when no one was watching. That kind of faith is powerful because it is rooted in conviction, not reward. You also learned what it feels like to sit with unanswered questions without losing your trust in God. That is not small. That is advanced spiritual maturity. Many walk away at that point. You didn't. You may not realize this yet, but that season detoxed you. It removed the need to prove yourself. It broke unhealthy attachment to outcomes. It taught you how to rest without guilt. And rest is not laziness. Rest is trust. Some of you were forced to slow down physically, emotionally, or mentally. Your body demanded rest. Your mind demanded clarity. And instead of fighting it, you eventually surrendered. That surrender healed things you didn't even know were wounded. That season also refined your discernment with people. You noticed who only celebrated you when you were useful. You noticed who disappeared when you couldn't offer anything. That awareness hurt. But it also freed you. You stopped chasing acceptance. You stopped overextending yourself. You stopped performing for approval. And that shift prepared you for healthier connections going forward. God was teaching you how to say no without guilt, how to wait without anxiety, how to trust without control. And slowly, without dramatic signs, your inner world became more stable, less reactive, more grounded. You stopped needing constant reassurance. You began to feel secure in God's presence alone. That is not failure. That is transformation. Let me say something that may challenge you. That season protected you from becoming arrogant. It protected you from identifying your worth with achievement. It anchored your identity in God rather than success. So when the time comes for movement, and it will, you will move from a place of wholeness, not hunger, from alignment, not desperation. That season was heavy because it was necessary. It was quiet because it was sacred. It was slow because it was precise. And now that you have passed through it, you carry something invaluable. You carry depth. And depth is what allows chosen ones to walk into new seasons without losing themselves. Honor that season. It did not delay you. It preserved you. You were being watched the entire time. I want you to understand this part clearly, without fear and without misunderstanding. Being watched by God is not about scrutiny. It is about care. It is about responsibility. God watches chosen ones the way a master craftsman watches a rare piece being formed, with patience, intention, and expectation. While you thought nothing was happening, heaven was paying attention to details you didn't think mattered. The way you treated people who could do nothing for you. The way you spoke when no one was listening. The choices you made when obedience cost you comfort. Those moments mattered. You were not being judged. You were being observed for readiness. God watches how you handle disappointment. He watches how you manage silence. He watches how you respond when prayers are delayed. Not to condemn you, but to see what kind of foundation is forming inside you. And you held your ground more than you realize. At the same time, the enemy was also watching. Not with care, but with intent. He was looking for cracks, for compromise, for moments of weakness he could exploit. He waited for bitterness to take root. He waited for pride to surface. He waited for impatience to override wisdom. But what he saw confused him. He saw you choosing integrity when no one would have blamed you for cutting corners. He saw you choosing humility when recognition was withheld. He saw you choosing restraint when revenge felt justified. Those choices disrupted his plans. You see, the enemy understands talent. He understands charisma. But he does not understand obedience. He does not understand surrender. And when someone consistently chooses alignment over impulse, his strategies lose effectiveness. God's attention is different. God watches with purpose. He was noting your growth, your increasing discernment, your ability to remain calm under pressure. Those qualities matter more to him than outward success. You may have felt like you were overlooked, but you were never ignored. Heaven was marking milestones you didn't celebrate, victories you didn't recognize, growth you didn't announce. You didn't need to announce them. God saw them. Some of you worried that your quiet life meant you weren't making impact. But impact in the spiritual realm does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like stability, like peace, like consistency. And consistency is rare. God noticed when you stopped reacting to old triggers. He noticed when you stopped entertaining distractions that once consumed you. He noticed when your prayers shifted from asking to surrendering. That shift matters deeply, because God does not release greater responsibility to those who crave control. He releases it to those who trust him enough to wait. You were learning to carry weight without collapsing, to hold authority without arrogance, to move with wisdom instead of urgency. That is why God watched you so closely, because what is coming requires maturity, not excitement, and you are growing into it. Let me say something that brings peace. God is not waiting for you to be flawless. He is waiting for you to be stable. stable in faith, stable in identity, stable in obedience. And stability is formed in quiet seasons, not loud ones. The enemy expected exposure. He expected burnout. He expected you to unravel emotionally, but you didn't. You adapted. You learned. You strengthened internally. That is why certain opportunities did not come earlier. You weren't being withheld from them. They were being withheld for you. God was protecting you from weight you weren't ready to carry yet. And now, because you endured, because you stayed aligned, because you remained teachable, something has shifted. You are not the same person you were when this season began. You are calmer, clearer, more discerning, and God sees that. You were being watched, not to trap you, but to prepare you. And preparation always precedes promotion. There were moments when you wondered if God had forgotten the promises He made to you. You replayed words spoken over your life, prayers you prayed with sincerity, and the silence felt confusing. But silence does not mean absence. It means God is working in ways that do not require your input yet. God was watching how you handled waiting. Waiting reveals trust more than movement ever could. Anyone can say they believe when things are happening, but belief that remains steady in stillness is rare. And you demonstrated that, even when it felt uncomfortable. Some of you became more private during this season. Not secretive, just protective. You stopped sharing everything. You stopped seeking validation for every step. That was not isolation. That was discernment growing. God was pleased with that. He was watching you develop boundaries without guilt, watching you choose peace over people-pleasing, watching you let go of control and accept that not everything needs immediate answers. That surrender is powerful. The enemy expected frustration to turn into rebellion. He expected disappointment to turn into resentment. But instead, you softened. You became more compassionate. You learned empathy without losing discernment. That balance is not common. God was also watching your heart posture, not just what you did, but why you did it. When no one rewarded your faithfulness, when obedience felt thankless, when doing the right thing cost you emotionally, and you still chose alignment, that choice carries weight in the spiritual realm. Some of you have been wondering why certain temptations lost their pull, why certain desires faded naturally. That is not coincidence. That is growth. God was recalibrating your appetites, aligning your desires with your future assignment. He was preparing you to handle what is coming without losing yourself. You didn't rush. You didn't force doors. You didn't manipulate outcomes. And that restraint built trust. Trust between you and God. That trust matters more than speed. Now hear this clearly. God does not promote based on pressure from people. He promotes based on readiness. And readiness is revealed in unseen moments. You passed tests you didn't even know were tests. You honored God when no one was watching. You stayed faithful when recognition was absent. You waited when moving early would have felt satisfying. That is why God watched you so closely, because those who can be trusted in private can be trusted in public. So if you ever wondered whether your quiet obedience mattered, let this settle it. It mattered deeply. He saw you, and He has not forgotten you. What happens next for you? Now listen carefully, because this is where many chosen ones become anxious and accidentally step out of alignment. What happens next is not about rushing. It is not about proving anything. And it is not about suddenly doing more. What happens next is about moving differently. When God is pleased, He does not throw you into chaos. He brings you into order. You may have noticed something already shifting, not dramatically, not loudly, but subtly. Your thoughts are clearer, your reactions are slower, your spirit feels steadier. That is not coincidence. That is transition beginning internally before it shows externally. God always moves inside you before He moves around you. What comes next is clarity, not all at once, but step by step. You will begin to sense what deserves your energy and what no longer does. Decisions that once felt confusing will feel simpler, not because life becomes easy, but because discernment sharpens. You will also feel less pressure to explain yourself, less urgency to announce your plans, less need to seek approval. That is a sign of maturity, not withdrawal. When God is preparing to shift your environment, He first stabilizes your inner world. Do not rush this. Many people miss their moment because they try to force visibility before alignment is complete. But you are not meant to chase doors. You are meant to recognize the right ones when they open. What happens next will require patience. Quiet patience. The kind that does not panic when progress feels slow. The kind that trusts God's timing more than emotional urgency. Some of you will notice new opportunities appearing, but they will feel different. Less chaotic, less draining, more aligned. If something requires you to abandon your peace to access it, it is not from God. Pay attention to that. God is also teaching you restraint in this next season. Not everyone needs access to your plans. Not everyone needs explanations. Not everyone celebrating you deserves proximity. Protection increases with responsibility. You are entering a phase where obedience matters more than excitement, where small instructions carry big consequences, where listening carefully saves you from unnecessary detours. This is not a season to be impulsive. It is a season to be intentional. You may also experience a sense of calm detachment from outcomes. You will still care, you will still hope, but you will no longer cling. That is healthy. That is trust. God is not preparing you for something flashy. He is preparing you for something stable, something sustainable, something that will last. And that requires grounded people, not rushed ones. Let me caution you gently. Do not confuse stillness with stagnation. God is working even when movement is minimal. Seeds do not sprout the day after planting. They develop unseen before they emerge. Honor the process. You may feel led to simplify, to clear distractions, to clean up emotional loose ends. Follow that leading. Order invites clarity. Clarity invites peace. And peace allows direction to settle without resistance. This next season is not about proving how strong you are. It is about trusting how led you are. And one more thing. Expect confirmation, not chaos. God confirms His direction through peace, consistency, and alignment, not through anxiety, pressure, or fear. If something feels rushed, step back. If something feels forced, pause. God does not rush His chosen ones into confusion. He leads them into clarity. What happens next will unfold naturally if you stay grounded, if you stay prayerful, if you stay humble. You don't need to announce anything yet. Just stay aligned. And when it is time to move, you will know. Conclusion: stay aligned, stay calm. Chosen one, let me leave you with this truth, and let it settle deep in your spirit. You are not late, you are not broken, and you were never overlooked. What you walked through was not meant to crush you, it was meant to clarify you. God is pleased with you, not because you were perfect, but because you were sincere, because you stayed soft in a hard season, because you chose alignment when no one would have blamed you for choosing survival instead. Heaven saw that, and the enemy miscalculated you. You are standing now with more wisdom, more discernment, and more peace than you had before. That is not accidental. That is evidence of growth, evidence of preparation, evidence that God trusted you with pressure because He knew you could carry it without losing yourself. Do not rush what God is unfolding. Stay calm, stay prayerful, stay grounded. You do not need to explain your journey to anyone. God understands it fully, and He is leading you forward with precision, not chaos. If this message spoke to you, if you felt peace instead of fear while listening, that is confirmation that it was meant for you. Before you go, chosen ones, give a like to this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Tap the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. And share this message with other chosen ones who need this encouragement right now. And comment 777 in the comments to declare that you are aligned, protected, and walking in the divine timing God has set for your life. Stay steady, stay faithful.